The crowd stood in perfect silence, broken only by the measured click of polished boots striking the marble path. Under the golden afternoon light, the tomb guard marched with precision so exact, it felt almost otherworldly. Tourists lowered their voices instinctively. Veterans stood a little straighter. Children pressed against the railings in awe. Then, a small figure stepped forward. A boy, no more than 7, squeezed past his mother's hand and walked toward the guard, clutching a tiny plastic handcuff toy. His face was pale with nervous excitement, but his eyes burned with determination. In a clear, shaky voice, he said something that made everyone freeze. "Sir, arrest me." The words echoed through the memorial like a bell. A few people chuckled, thinking it was a child's game. Others frowned, unsure whether to intervene. His mother gasped, reaching out, but the boy didn't move. He stood his ground, hands out as if surrendering. The guard, dressed in immaculate blue, did not flinch. His head remained perfectly forward, his white-gloved hands gripping the rifle with ceremonial precision. He had been trained to ignore distractions, to honor the fallen with unwavering discipline. But this was not just any distraction. The boy's small voice broke again, louder this time, trembling with emotion. "Please, I did something bad. Arrest me." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is this staged?" Someone murmured. A veteran near the front shook his head slowly. "No, this feels real." The tension thickened. This was sacred ground. Any disturbance was serious, and now all eyes were on the guard. For a few endless seconds, he remained still, like a statue carved in steel and honor. Then, with the crispness of a military drill, he pivoted to face the boy directly. Gasps erupted. His boots landed like thunder. Rifle tucked perfectly. No guard ever breaks formation unless duty demands it. His silent movement was more powerful than any words. The boy's lip quivered. His mother froze. Cameras lifted. The guard stepped forward slowly, stopping just inches from the boy. No words, no anger, no smile, just the overwhelming presence of discipline meeting innocence. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. What happened next would leave the crowd speechless. And the boy changed forever. Asterisk before that unforgettable moment beneath the golden sky. The tomb guard's life had already been shaped by silence, duty, and loss. His name wasn't spoken publicly by design. Guards at the tomb were meant to fade behind the uniform, becoming symbols of something far greater than themselves. But behind that perfect posture stood a man with a story carved in pain and discipline. 2 years earlier, he had served in a war zone halfway across the world. His closest friend, Private First Class Daniel Reeves, had been the kind of soldier who made everyone laugh during the worst nights. They had promised each other that if either one didn't make it home, the other would stand guard in his honor. Daniel never came back. When the helicopter exploded over the ridge, he was gone in seconds. The tomb guard carried Daniel's dog tag in his pocket every single day since. It wasn't just metal, it was a weight that anchored his purpose. When he returned to the States, instead of taking leave, he volunteered for the Sentinels of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, one of the most demanding ceremonial duties in the US military here. He could honor not just Daniel, but every unnamed hero whose story ended in silence. Training for the tomb is brutal. Candidates memorize 21 pages of exact orders. Their movements are timed to the second. Shoes are shined for hours until they reflect like mirrors. Any error, no matter how small, means starting over. And yet, through blisters and sleepless nights, he never faltered. Every step was a promise. "I will not forget." That day, the air at the memorial was unusually warm for spring. Hundreds of visitors from around the world gathered, including a group of veterans, a school tour, and families quietly pointing at the immaculate changing of the guard. Among them was a little boy named Adam. Adam was different from most kids. He was curious, but quiet. He clutched a small toy police badge that had once belonged to his father, a local officer who had passed away a year earlier. Adam's mother had brought him to the memorial as part of a healing trip, hoping to show him the meaning of duty, respect, and strength. But something had been eating away at Adam's guilt the week before. Adam had broken a neighbor's car window while playing. Instead of telling the truth, he had hidden. For days, he couldn't sleep. In his young mind, what he did felt like a crime. He believed he needed to be punished properly to feel right again. When he saw the tomb guard marching in flawless precision, something clicked. "Mom," he whispered. "He's like the most serious policeman ever." His mother smiled faintly. "He's not a policeman, sweetheart. He's a soldier." But Adam wasn't listening anymore. He had decided, if anyone could arrest him for real, it was this man. Not a mall cop, not a teacher, a guard who never moved, a symbol of justice and honor. As the crowd gathered for the afternoon rotation, whispers began about a notorious politician expected to arrive. Senator Mitchell, known for his arrogance and disregard for traditions, was scheduled to tour the grounds. Security tightened slightly, and photographers prepared for his entrance. Mitchell had a history. He had once dismissed military ceremonies as old theater, a comment that had deeply offended veterans. His arrival added an unspoken tension to the air. People wondered, would he respect the silence here? The tomb guard, however, remained unaffected. His world narrowed to the exact measured steps. 21 paces. Turn. Pause. Repeat. He had faced worse than disrespect. He had faced war. Meanwhile, Adam edged closer and closer to the low rope barrier. His mother warned him gently to stay back, but his childish resolve hardened. He felt his toy handcuffs in his pocket and whispered to himself, I have to do this. It's the right thing. In his mind, stepping forward wasn't mischief, it was justice. The sun lowered slightly, casting long shadows across the white stone. Veterans adjusted their caps. Tourists lifted their cameras. The changing of the guard ceremony was minutes away. At that precise moment, Adam took a deep breath, slipped under the rope, and walked forward. Gasps broke through the quiet. Mothers held their children. A veteran muttered, "Oh no." The tomb guard's peripheral vision caught the movement, but he did not break formation. Not yet. He finished his 21 paces, turned sharply, and marched back with unwavering rhythm. The crowd watched, breath held. Adam stopped in the center of the guard's path, holding out his tiny wrists with the toy handcuffs dangling. His voice shook. "Sir, arrest me." That single line carried a child's fear, a soldier's discipline, and an entire crowd's disbelief. The guard's backstory, the politician's impending entrance, and the boy's innocent guilt had all converged into this one impossible moment, setting the stage for a scene no one would ever forget. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to stop. The boy stood frozen, arms out, the plastic handcuffs glinting weakly against the marble sunlight. The tomb guard's boots halted just inches from Adam's tiny shoes. Around them, the crowd fell into a reverent, uncertain hush, the kind that fills a sacred place when something unexpected happens. The guard stared forward, motionless, his jaw set in silent discipline. He was trained for interruptions, tourists breaking lines, phones ringing, occasional disrespect, but never this. A child, trembling with sincerity, had stepped into his world of precision and ritual, and for the first time in years, something inside him stirred. At the edge of the crowd, security personnel exchanged worried glances. One of them reached for his radio, but the senior officer held up a hand. "Hold. Let's see how the Sentinel handles this." They knew the guards were trained to deal with disturbances themselves without breaking the aura of the ceremony. This wasn't just a job, it was a legacy. Adam's mother stood pale and breathless. "Adam, come back here," she whispered harshly, but he didn't turn. His eyes were locked on the guard like a prisoner facing judgment. Then came a low, collective murmur. Tourists began pulling out phones, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. Veterans near the front stiffened in attention. One older man removed his cap, holding it to his chest. "Let's see what this young sentinel's made of," he murmured. The guard took one slow, deliberate step forward. The sound of his heel striking the stone was sharp as a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No guard breaks formation unless it's serious. Adam flinched, but didn't run. He closed his eyes, whispering, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll make it right." The guard's shadow fell over the boy like a towering sentinel of justice. Still silent, he adjusted the rifle against his shoulder with ceremonial precision, not as a threat, but as a symbol of authority. The tension climbed like a slow drumbeat. People leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. The guard was about to make a choice between tradition and humanity, between the script and the soul. Before he could act, the arrival of Senator Mitchell shattered the stillness. A convoy of black SUVs rolled up behind the crowd. Doors opened, flashes popped. Security details surrounded the senator as he strode forward, flanked by aides and reporters. He wore a sharp suit, sunglasses, and an expression that radiated self-importance. "Let's get this over with," he muttered to a staffer, loud enough for nearby veterans to hear. Whispers turned into low grumbles. Many recognized him. This was the man who had once mocked ceremonial guards on national television. As he approached, his dismissive tone grew louder. "Honestly, soldiers marching in circles, outdated theater. We should be focusing on real issues, not marble and pageantry." A veteran clenched his fists. Another whispered, "Not here, not today." But Mitchell was oblivious. He noticed the commotion near the guard and smirked. "What's this? A little kid interrupting the great ceremony. Seems even children know this is just a performance." The crowd turned sharply toward him, disgust, disbelief, fury, but no one moved. This was still sacred ground. The guard, however, did not react. His posture remained perfect, eyes forward, chin high, as if the senator's words were carried away by the wind. His discipline was a wall, and that silent defiance only made the senator more irritated. He strutted closer, past the barrier, ignoring warnings from security. "Oh, come on. It's just a guy with a gun and shiny shoes. Let the kid play along," he said, laughing. His photographer eagerly snapped shots. Adam looked back briefly, confused by the senator's mocking tone, but then he turned back to the guard. "Please, sir, I did something bad. I should be arrested." His voice cracked, tears welled in his eyes. The crowd's amusement turned to somber silence. Even those who didn't understand the language felt the weight of his plea. The guard pivoted sharply, bringing his rifle to his side. The motion was so precise and sudden that the senator actually flinched. Gasps exploded. Phones recorded every second. The sentinel now faced both the innocent boy and the arrogant politician, two extremes of humanity standing before him. His eyes, hidden behind his ceremonial stillness, scanned the situation. For Adam, this was about truth. For the senator, this was about ego. For the guard, it was about honor. He slowly lowered his left hand, extending it palm out toward Adam, a silent signal for the boy to stay still. Adam obeyed instantly, his tiny chest heaving. Then, without saying a word, the guard took 2 firm steps toward the senator. The senator laughed nervously. "What's this? You going to arrest me too, soldier?" The guard stopped inches away, rifle perfectly vertical, boots aligned with mathematical precision. He stood like a monument of discipline, staring down a monument of arrogance. The crowd erupted in whispers. Someone muttered, "Oh, it's on now." A security agent tried to intervene, but the colonel in charge raised his hand again. "Let the sentinel do his duty," he said calmly. The senator leaned in, mocking, "You don't scare me. This is all for show." But the guard's stillness had a power words couldn't match. Every breath, every inch of his posture radiated a message older than politics. "This ground is sacred. Your arrogance does not belong here." The crowd grew restless. Veterans began removing their hats. A woman whispered, "He's holding the line." Then, in a move that stunned everyone, the guard slammed the rifle butt against the marble once, a sound that echoed like thunder. The senator jerked back, startled. Reporters jumped. The boy gasped. This wasn't aggression. This was the sentinel's formal warning, a ritualized, controlled act, used only when someone crosses the line of decorum. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The crowd fell silent, their earlier whispers replaced by reverent anticipation. Adam's tears dried as he stared wide-eyed at the guard. Now realizing the weight of the man before him, the senator stumbled a step back, trying to regain his composure, but the damage was done. In that moment, the tomb guard commanded the ground like a timeless guardian, while the senator looked like a child caught misbehaving. And Adam, he suddenly understood that this wasn't a game. It was a place of truth, where honor wasn't spoken, it was lived. The guard turned his head slightly toward the boy. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. No words were exchanged. But in that silent glance, a bond was formed between a boy seeking justice and a soldier who embodied it. The conflict had escalated from innocent mischief to a public test of respect, and the next moments would decide everything. The marble plaza was now a stage, not for spectacle, but for a confrontation between values. On one side stood a boy, trembling yet sincere, his toy handcuffs dangling like a confession. On the other, a senator puffed with ego, his voice cutting through the reverent air like static. And between them, a tomb guard, motionless, disciplined, and burning with silent purpose. The rifle strike against the marble still echoed faintly. The senator's smug grin faltered. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters whispered, realizing they were capturing something far beyond a typical press event. "Is this being recorded?" a staffer hissed. "Everything is," a journalist replied without lowering her camera. Adam's mother stood near the rope barrier, hands pressed to her chest. She hadn't expected this. She only wanted her son to learn respect, not to witness a public reckoning. The senator stepped forward, trying to reclaim dominance. "Listen, soldier," he said loudly, aware of the cameras. "I know this little routine of yours is supposed to be impressive, but I'm here on official business. Don't try to intimidate me." He waved a dismissive hand, and in doing so, he accidentally brushed the guard's ceremonial sleeve. The air cracked, like lightning. The moment the senator's hand made contact, the guard snapped into action. With machine-like precision, he stepped back, pivoted sharply, and brought the rifle to a ready vertical position. The sound of his boots, the whirl of the pivot, and the thud of the rifle but hitting the ground rang out like a drum roll before judgment. The crowd gasped in unison. Veterans instinctively stiffened to attention. Even the senator flinched, his bravado slipping. This was the line, the invisible boundary between respectful presence and violation of sacred protocol, and he had crossed it. The guard didn't speak. He didn't need to. His posture was iron, his gaze locked straight ahead. The silence he held was heavier than any shouted command. "Hey," the senator laughed nervously, looking around. It was just a touch, relaxed, but the crowd wasn't laughing. Their silence had turned into something else, anticipation. They were watching a moment of consequence unfold. Adam, standing only a few feet away, sensed the shift. He had come here to get arrested, but now, something bigger was happening. The guard's response wasn't directed at him anymore. It was aimed squarely at the man who mocked tradition. Adam's small hands clenched around his toy badge. His heart pounded as he watched the soldier face down a powerful adult, not with aggression, but with unshakable discipline. For a child, it was like watching a hero step out of a storybook. The senator, feeling cornered, tried to regain the spotlight. He stepped closer again, puffing his chest. "I'm a United States senator," he barked. "You're a ceremonial guard. Know your place." Gasps erupted. Even his own aides winced. One security agent whispered frantically into his earpiece, but the guard didn't move. His silence was a mirror reflecting the senator's arrogance back at him, making it look smaller with each passing second. The crowd shifted. Veterans began to whisper. "He touched the sentinel. You don't do that. He doesn't even realize where he's standing." The energy in the air tightened like a drawn bow. Then, in a moment no one expected, Adam stepped forward again. His small voice trembled, but carried through the silence. "Sir, arrest him too. He touched you." Every head turned. The senator's face twisted. What did he just say? The guard didn't react outwardly, but inside, something broke through the rigid wall he had built over years of service. This boy, innocent, earnest, saw right through the facade. He had come to surrender for his own mistake. But in the process, he had identified real disrespect standing right next to him. For the first time in a long time, the guard allowed himself a decision not written in the manual. With a thunderous stomp, he took one step forward, standing squarely between Adam and the senator. His presence was overwhelming, not just because of his uniform, but because of the symbol he embodied. Then, slowly, he raised his left hand and extended it toward the senator. It was not a handshake. It was a formal warning gesture, rarely seen outside of ceremonial reprimands, a silent command meaning, "Step back, show respect, or face consequences." The senator froze. Cameras captured the moment from every angle. Is he allowed to do that? A tourist whispered. "Oh yes," a veteran replied softly. "He's doing his duty." A senator's confident mask cracked. His ego met a wall it couldn't push through. This wasn't a press conference. This wasn't a campaign stop. This was sacred ground, and he was standing before a soldier who represented centuries of unbroken respect. Adam watched with wide, glistening eyes. In his world, adults always had the power, but now, a single guard's silence had humbled a man with national authority. The boy stepped closer to the guard's side, almost instinctively, as if seeking protection behind honor itself. The crowd collectively held its breath. The senator opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the colonel overseeing the ceremony stepped out from the side, his uniform crisp, his medals glinting. He stood beside the guard and snapped a sharp salute, not to the senator, but to the sentinel. The meaning was unmistakable. "The guard is in the right," the colonel said firmly, his voice carrying across the plaza. "You are on hallowed ground, Senator. Show respect." The senator stumbled back, his cheeks flushing red. His entourage tried to usher him away, but the cameras had already captured everything. His arrogance had met its match, not in a shouting opponent, but in a silent protector. The turning point had come. In a single, disciplined gesture, the guard had exposed arrogance, protected innocence, and upheld honor without uttering a single word. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a wave of reverent applause. Veterans saluted. Children stared in awe. Reporters lowered their cameras, realizing they had witnessed something more powerful than politics. Adam looked up at the guard, his guilt forgotten for a moment, replaced by pure admiration, and the guard, for just the briefest second, allowed his eyes to soften as he looked down at the boy. The senator, now visibly shaken, retreated toward his convoy. He came expecting a photo op. He left having been publicly humbled by tradition itself. The plaza fell silent once more, not out of fear, but respect. The next act would decide how this moment would live in history. The tension in the plaza had reached its peak. Time itself seemed to bend around the tomb guard and the boy, as if the world had narrowed to this one sacred encounter. Adam's small hands clutched his toy handcuffs, but this time, he wasn't the only one under judgment. The arrogance of the senator, the lingering whispers of the crowd, and the weight of tradition all converged in the silent presence of one man. The guard stood perfectly still, a monument of discipline and calm. The senator, flustered and shaken, realized that every move he made was being recorded and scrutinized, not by the military hierarchy, but by the eyes of the nation watching from phones and cameras. His smirk had vanished. Confidence had been replaced by a flicker of fear. The colonel, still standing nearby, nodded subtly toward the guard. It was the unspoken signal. He had the authority, the discretion, and the moral high ground. In that instant, the crowd understood that nothing would escalate further unless the senator himself chose to disrespect the solemn ground again. Adam, sensing the silent power radiating from the guard, whispered, barely audible, "Please, make him understand." The guard, understanding more than the boy could ever imagine, stepped forward in measured motion. Every footfall was deliberate, precise, a choreography learned from countless hours of ceremonial training. He paused directly in front of the senator. Then, with a calmness that made the world seem to hold its breath, he gestured for the senator to stand down. No words were spoken, but the command carried the weight of centuries of military discipline. The boy watched wide-eyed as the man who had mocked ritual, tradition, and authority finally looked small and humbled. The senator's staff shuffled nervously. Cameras captured every detail: the rigid posture of the guard, the flush on the senator's face, the collective astonishment of the crowd. There was no shouting, no confrontation, yet the power dynamic was clear. A murmur spread through the spectators. He's being held accountable, without even saying a word. Even the boy's mother felt tears prick her eyes. Her son, so worried about his own small wrongdoing, now witnessed the immensity of honor and restraint. Then, almost imperceptibly, the guard motioned to Adam. He knelt slightly, maintaining perfect composure, and gently extended his hands not to punish, but to acknowledge the boy's courage and honesty. Adam froze for a moment, then slowly placed his tiny wrists in the toy handcuffs. But this time, it wasn't about guilt or punishment. It was about learning responsibility, courage, and respect. The act was symbolic, a bridge between innocence and understanding, between childhood mistakes and lifelong lessons. The crowd erupted in soft applause and whispered awe. Reporters snapped pictures furiously, knowing this moment would go viral instantly. The senator, realizing that his arrogance had been publicly exposed, stepped back, muttering something inaudible, retreating toward his convoy. His entourage followed quickly, a mixture of embarrassment and astonishment written clearly on their faces. Adam's mother rushed forward and wrapped him in a tight embrace. He buried his face in her shoulder, tears of relief and admiration streaming down. He didn't yell. He didn't even get mad, Adam whispered. He hit a hero. The guard slowly straightened, returning to his post with the same flawless precision, as if nothing had happened. The rifle rested neatly against his shoulder, every step measured. The boy watched in awe, knowing that this silent, disciplined act carried far more weight than any words could convey. A veteran nearby removed his cap, holding it over his chest, muttering quietly, "Discipline, strength, true honor." Cameras captured the final detail, the boy whispering thank you while the guard, still unwavering, gave a subtle nod, a gesture of recognition and approval, connecting to generations through courage, respect, and understanding. That the moment was pure, cinematic, and unforgettable. Social media feeds would light up with clips, hashtags trending worldwide, but those standing in the plaza that day would remember something far deeper than virality. They had witnessed a sacred intersection of innocence and duty, where the smallest person taught the largest lesson, and where the largest figure embodied the highest honor. As Adam was led back to his mother, he turned to glance at the guard one last time. In that brief look, he saw not only authority but mercy, not just discipline but understanding. For a boy who had come seeking punishment, he had received something far greater, a lesson in courage, empathy, and integrity. And for the tomb guard, it was a quiet victory. He had upheld the sanctity of his post, defended tradition, and ensured that respect both for the past and for the present prevailed without a single raised voice. The plaza slowly returned to normal, but no one moved quickly. Cameras clicked for a few more seconds, the murmurs of the crowd rising and falling like soft waves. Everyone there understood that discipline had triumphed over chaos. Honor had overshadowed arrogance, and silence had spoken louder than words ever could. For Adam, the boy who begged to be arrested, this was a turning point in his life. The world had shown him, through a man who barely moved his lips, that courage is quiet, respect is deliberate, and true authority is earned, not demanded. In that instant, the world had changed, at least for one small boy, one dedicated tomb guard, and the hundreds of witnesses who would carry the memory forever. The plaza slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Tourists resumed their quiet wandering, and the soft echo of polished boots against marble once again filled the air. But for Adam, for the boy who had begged to be arrested, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. He stood beside his mother, still clutching his toy handcuffs, now warm with memory and meaning. The fear and guilt that had consumed him all week seemed to dissolve into awe. He looked up at the tomb guard, who had returned to his post with perfect composure. Every movement sharp, precise, yet somehow gentle in its weight. He's a hero, Adam whispered, his voice almost lost in the breeze. The mother smiled, tears in her eyes. She had always wanted her son to understand respect and integrity, but she hadn't imagined he would see it in action in such a powerful, living way. The tomb guard stood silently, rifle poised, eyes forward. He glanced briefly at the boy and gave a subtle nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not condescension. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed insignificant. To Adam, it was monumental. The nod said, "I see you. You did the right thing by being brave." The crowd, meanwhile, began to disperse slowly, murmuring among themselves. Veterans offered respectful nods. Photographers packed up their cameras, and the air seemed to hum with quiet reverence. Some lingered, whispering about the child, the guard, and the stunning display of honor without words. The colonel approached the tomb guard after the ceremony, his medals catching the sunlight. He saluted crisply. "Outstanding. Today you not only upheld your duty, but reminded every witness here what true service looks like," the colonel said. The guard, still maintaining composure, returned the salute with quiet dignity. There were no speeches, no accolades. In this world, action spoke louder than praise. He reached into his pocket and touched the dog tag he carried for his fallen friend. A private moment of reflection amid the public spectacle. The day's events had reinforced the principle he had lived by for years. Honor is not just in standing guard, it's in protecting innocence, showing restraint, and acting with integrity even when eyes are watching. Adam tugged gently at his mother's sleeve. "Mum, do you think I did okay?" he asked, voice small but hopeful. She knelt and held him close, her eyes shining. "You were brave, sweetheart, and you learned something very important today." Adam's gaze drifted back to the guard. Even at a distance, the man's stillness and resolve left an imprint on his young mind. It was more than discipline. It was a lesson in courage, morality, and respect, a memory that would shape him for life. Later, when the plaza emptied, the tomb guard took a moment alone. He stared at the monument in the fading sunlight, his reflection mingling with the shadows of the honored fallen. His thoughts went to his friend Daniel, and he whispered softly, "We did it today. I hope you're proud." The dog tag in his hand gleamed in the waning light. It was more than a piece of metal. It was a reminder of duty, of sacrifices unseen, and of the lessons we pass on. Adam, meanwhile, left the plaza hand in hand with his mother, but he carried something far heavier than guilt or a broken toy. He carried the understanding that true authority is gentle yet firm, that respect is earned through action, and that courage sometimes comes in small packages. Even as they walked away, he glanced back one last time. The guard had resumed his post, rifle in hand, every step exact, every motion flawless. But now, in Adam's mind, the uniforms symbolized more than duty, it symbolized heart, honor, and heroism. In that quiet moment, the lessons of the day crystallized. Discipline had triumphed over chaos, humility had humbled arrogance, and a child had learned that courage isn't loud sometimes. It's simply standing still and doing what's right. As the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the marble in golden light, the tomb guard remained on watch, and though no one else would notice, he carried the invisible victory in his heart. Another generation touched, another soul inspired, another story of honor silently told. The boy had asked for punishment. The world had given him a lesson in greatness, and both would carry the memory forever. The plaza was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The crowd had dispersed, cameras were put away, and the hum of everyday life returned. But the memory of what had just unfolded lingered, a story of courage, honor, and unwavering discipline. For a small boy named Adam, it was a moment that would shape his understanding of right and wrong, bravery, and respect. He had come seeking punishment for a mistake, only to witness the profound strength of a man who chose silence over anger, discipline over chaos. In that brief encounter, he learned a lesson far greater than any scolding or lecture could teach. The tomb guard returned to his post, rifle polished, posture flawless, eyes forward. To the outside world, nothing had changed. But those who had seen him that day knew better. They had seen a living symbol of dedication, restraint, and integrity. He had reminded everyone present that honor is not a word, but an action. Tradition is not weakness, but strength. Thus Adam and his mother walked away. The boy whispered one final word, carried lightly on the wind, "Hero." And in that simple, earnest declaration lay the power of the moment, a child recognizing greatness not in loud words or medals, but in quiet courage and unwavering principles. This story serves as a reminder to us all. True authority doesn't demand respect, it inspires it. Discipline doesn't need applause, it speaks for itself. And acts of courage, big or small, leave lasting marks on hearts and minds alike. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to see the power of honor in action. Subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, respect, and humanity. And remember, sometimes the strongest actions are the quietest ones, and the smallest voices carry the greatest lessons.